I have two questions for you. What is the hook of your memoir? And what is its inciting incident? Do you know the difference between the two? And I know your next question to me is going to be, can I use my inciting incident as the hook in my memoir? I know because I get that question all the time. So we're going to look at those questions in this video. Hello, I'm Brenda. This is Write Your Story, and I'm here to help you to write your memoir. Let's start with the hook. What is it? Where does it go? And how do you use it? The hook is the curiosity that the reader has for what your story is about. And that hook first shows up on the back cover of your book. There you will let the reader know what your story is about, and you will hook them to open your book in order to read your story. After that, the hook needs to show up in your first chapter. Your first chapter functions as the hook, and it needs to fulfill 4 criteria. Your first chapter needs to establish the groundwork for your story. It needs to introduce the key characters. It needs to tell us what the stakes are, and it needs to build suspense. Now, this last one, building suspense, is where often the confusion comes in with regard to the inciting incident. So we're going to address that in this video. But that essentially, in a nutshell, is the hook, where to use it, and how it functions. Now let's look at that inciting incident. Your inciting incident is to be found in the first act of your memoir, around the 3/4 mark. Anywhere between 70, 80, 88% of the first act is where we are going to find your inciting incident. And to incite something is often used when we talk about change, when we talk about upheaval, rebellion, revolution. To change something, to incite something, is to create, to stimulate a change that has to come, that follows. And that is really what your inciting incident is. It is that first event in your story that is where you as the character meet and brush against the change that is going to come in your story, the journey you're going to take us on, that big question that you are going to answer in your memoir comes because of this inciting incident, this change that this event brings about in you and in the story. And what is it? So to give you a simple example, in my memoir, it would be the death of my mother. Without the death of my mother as my inciting incident, I would never go on the journey, the quest, the upheaval that followed in my grief afterwards. The one would not happen without the other. So what is the inciting incident in your memoir? Perhaps we decide we're going to move countries because we're going to write a lifestyle memoir. We're going to go live in Portugal, and we're going to go off the grid on a homestead. What is the inciting incident in your story that puts you on that trajectory? Perhaps it's been stuck in the traffic once again under gray skies with rain coming down your windscreen and spending no time with your family, that you decide this is it, we're making the move. That is your inciting incident. So what is the inciting incident in your memoir? Now, that question, can the inciting incident be the hook in the first chapter of your memoir? And so my answer to that question is, it could be. It doesn't have to be, and perhaps it shouldn't be. So let's look at what I mean. It could be that you use the inciting incident in your chapter 1 as the hook because it is exciting, because it does speak to the rest of your story. And this is what you think is going to function really well. If you do that, keep in mind this. 1, does this inciting incident actually fulfill the function of the hook in chapter 1, where it is establishing the groundwork of the story, where it is going to introduce the main characters, and it's going to tell us what's at stake? We don't want it just to build suspense. The other thing to keep in mind is, that inciting incident still needs to be 3/4 of the way through Act 1. So you will need to come back to it in some shape and form. And we don't necessarily want to read chapter 1 verbatim later in your memoir. So think about that. It could be that it would work, but it doesn't have to be. And it doesn't have to be because they are two different functions. Be very clear in your mind that the hook and the inciting incident have two different functions. And so therefore, it perhaps shouldn't be that you use the inciting incident as your hook. It is preferable to find something else that starts your story off well, that will build to the inciting incident and take us on that journey. Now let's also talk about build suspense. Build suspense doesn't mean that it's crackerjack fireworks. As I've said earlier in this video, I think the problem comes in because one of the functions of the hook in chapter 1 is to build suspense. And when we say build suspense, we think it needs to be fireworks. It needs to be exciting. It needs to be so tantalizing that the reader can't but want to read the rest of our story. Building suspense isn't just fireworks. You can build suspense slowly. You can build suspense by establishing the groundwork, introducing the characters, letting us know quite early on what's at stake, and watch my video where I talk about when to reveal what's at stake. And then actually in the use of your story, in the way you structure it, as you tell your story, you can build to the inciting incident, and it doesn't have to be crackerjack exciting. It needs to be interesting. There's a difference. Building suspense is interesting. Inciting incident is that change, which doesn't also have to be exciting. It can just be what is the incident that puts you on the journey that causes the change. So if you don't have a very exciting memoir, no fear. You don't need one to have a hook for your reader, and you don't need one in order to have an inciting incident. And once we have that very clear in our minds, we will know whether we can use our inciting incident as the hook or not. If this is still unclear for you, if you're still needing help with this, look in my description below for the link that will take you to the course and the workbook, which will be available if it's not yet, with regard to helping you know what your memoir is about and the story that you are telling. It will help you determine the premise of your memoir. And the last little piece I want to leave you with is this, that I think will help you with the hook and the inciting incident and knowing the difference. The hook is the beginning of your story. The inciting incident is the beginning of your journey. They are different, and use them strategically. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them for you. Otherwise, I will see you in my course, or I will see you in the next video.